forgot to do that for the YouTube. I did that last time as well. So now we're recording. Yeah, of course we like hear coroner, but this definitely helped put it into perspective on exactly what they do. But again, hearing some of the things that like they aren't qualified, or they are qualified for, but they don't have a medical background, but also police handle some parts of it. And it was kind of nice to have it explained, but at the same time, I feel like John Bateson sat down with Holmes and was just like, okay, tell me everything. And then from there, he had to figure out this puzzle piece, but also wanted to be anecdotal about it and like, share all these fascinating stories. And while most of them were indeed fascinating, some of the high profile cases that he got to do, or him retiring right before Robin Williams died. And that was crazy. Kind of like what you were saying about Rebecca, the last couple of chapters too, I was kind of like, okay, what else are we going over? But I do think the last like 3 chapters were like some of the best parts of the book. I loved hearing Holmes kind of talk about, and I posted that on the Morbidly Curious Book Club Instagram today, like him talking about his perspective on death and his perspective on life. And I thought that was very well done. The notes and notifications is one of the best chapters. But yeah, some of like the power struggles at first, I was like, okay, what are we doing? And he was talking about like kids killing their parents. And I think I want to love this, but something bothers me about this, and I've thought about it all day. I can't put my finger on it. Something just for some reason rubs me the wrong way with exactly how this is told. And a part of my brain is like, why don't you just pick up a book on like, like a textbook almost, like, but my brain, I was kind of thinking like expecting like a textbook, like there being all these statistics and there being all this information on exactly what a coroner does. And another fascinating thing is this is only one county. Like I kind of wanted to hear different perspectives from different coroners from different counties, because I'm sure it'll be different despite a lot happening in Marin County and, it being so close to San Quentin prison, which again is fascinating. And of course, one of the first notes I had was, oh, San Quentin, the first person that comes to mind is Scott Peterson, who was just taken off of death row, like right before California had a, what is it called, a moratorium on the death penalty. And again, this book too, my boyfriend just kind of lives vicariously through all of the stuff that I read, because he really doesn't have time to read. And sometimes we would like, just ask each other like moral questions, like, what do you think about the, the death penalty? Or what do you think about assisted suicide? And it would actually have like, fascinating conversations therein. But it did bring up a lot of moral questions, which I love, and I really wanted for this book club, and I know the next book is definitely going to do that as well. I wish I had this discussion. One of the discussion questions, though, I really wanted to ask was like, what was the most fascinating thing you learned? Kind of like you were saying with the Golden Gate Bridge, like whatever side they land on is like the side that the county takes. So if anybody wanted to tell me like their favorite fact that they learned or something that stuck with them the most, while I look for other notes that I have, because I lost my discussion questions somewhere. I don't know where they are.
I think, just to echo what everybody else said, I think the whole idea that they didn't have to have a medical background at all was, I think it was like jaw-dropping in a way, that these people and their testimony specifically can be so integral to homicide or a murder case, and they're not actually, I mean, depending on how many years they have experience, but they're not actually an expert per se. They've had some training, but they're not medical professionals. And I thought that was, I don't know, that I think that set wrong with me the entire rest of the book.
I was confused on some parts, though, because Holmes would say like, well, I was a coroner, but I never did autopsies. And I think some parts the author would just like say stuff like that, and I'm like, wait, do coroners typically do autopsies? Like, can we go back? I need like the standard here, because it seems like a lot throughout his career he was just kind of like coming and going with certain, I don't know, like maybe I'd have to find the specific parts, but like, yeah, sometimes it would say that, and I needed you to tell me what the norm was, and sometimes I wouldn't get that. Also, the first story that was told in this, my boyfriend works on a job site similar to the guy who asked his coworker to just dig him a 6-foot hole for no reason. And I asked Chris if he would do that. He was like, I don't know. It depends on what it would be for. And I'm like, well, the typical person would ask and not just do it. So that was like the first conversation that we had is, would you do this for one of your coworkers? He's like, depends on who it was and depends on what it was for. Also, really hate that they don't typically keep case files for more than 10 years. Hate that. But also they were saying some of them were so old, it was like onion, what do they say, onion paper or something like that, and they were just falling apart. That.
I think that like my biggest like I think fun fact that I hate is how politicized it is when it really isn't something that should be political. The fact that the coroner is like an elected position doesn't make any sense to me. I think what it is that the coroner doesn't have to have anything other than like the basic like police training, and then if they happen to have some kind of medical degree or like education in science, then they can perform the autopsies. But like generally the coroner themselves will like just be like an investigator, and then they'll outsource the autopsy to like a private institution that does the science part of it and then give the result back to the coroner's office.
Right.
Is what it seemed like was happening to me. But then especially at the end, I got really discouraged when I was reading all of the ways that like, you know, funding and like how the supervisory board or the sheriff's office or whatever, like depending on how the coroner's department is structured, depends on like how well death investigations are conducted. And like these are people's lives, and it just seems like another cash grab and another way for like people to leverage and further their own personal, like it just was very upsetting. I was like, I didn't realize that. I thought that coroners were like, you know, they were scientists, and scientists are true to science and they want to find out the truth, and to find out that it's way more political than that. And I feel like the book didn't, it only had those like few chapters on that, or like that one chapter on that. I wanted more content about like and honestly, like after reading the chapter about San Quentin, I wanted to read a book about like the prison pipeline and all of that, because I think it just opens up this whole can of worms. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah, a lot of the end of some chapters would leave me with like, okay, well, I think I purchased a book called Waiting for an Echo, which I think is about the prison system. So we might read that one, because after San Quentin, I think I literally have a note in here that's like, okay, well, now I want a whole book on San Quentin, because that's fascinating that they just let the inmates do drugs, because if they didn't, it would be a fucking frenzy, and like they would all just be killing each other. And I'm like, wait, can we revisit that really quick, because that's fascinating. But also hate that, you know, sometimes autopsies are so expensive that they would make the families pay for it. Like, oh, you think this was a suspicious death? Like, you need to pay for this, which God knows how much that costs. I would love to know that. But also, yes, kind of similar to what Giselle was saying, is like, okay, well, if I die, I would like a medical professional to be the one examining me, and not just some guy who sometimes has a gun but doesn't want to use it, come in and like check me out and make sure that I wasn't killed by, you know, my sister in my sleep or something like that. So I agree. I think he even said there was one year where he was the only one who ran, so he just got it. Like it was an election and he was the only one who was like running. I can't remember specific. At the end of the book too, I realized like a lot of these stories were really powerful, but there was a lot of them, and I was worried by this point, with my memory being what it is, I wouldn't remember any of the stories really, and therefore would get lost in the facts, and would get lost in what it is actually like to be a coroner, which is kind of happening. And I hate that. And I'm glad I took notes, and I'm glad I have it tabbed, because again, I was getting lost in all the anecdotes. Let's see, what else do I have? Some of these stories were really fascinating though. Also on the topic of just coroners and it being political, I think there was even one instance, it was the chapter on Candace, which was one of those chapters, or a sub-chapter, I guess, where I was like, I don't really feel like this is necessary. but I will go along with it. Where he was talking about the woman whose ex-boyfriend shot himself on her front steps of the hair salon that she worked at. And she was like really confiding in Holmes because he had like a really relaxing voice and he really helped her through it. She would invite him over for dinner and he would go, and I'm like, what? Where is this going? This is weird. But she found out that her mother had terminal lung cancer, and then the husband, her dad, was like, if she goes, I'll go. And that was the assisted suicide kind of conversation, because Holmes was basically telling the mother, like, if you feel like this is what you want to do and you want to be, out of pain, this is what you should do. But anyway, the sergeant, once the mother did die and her husband shot himself with her in bed, Holmes called the communication center or the comm center and was like, this just happened, I need ambulance. I think he called for a couple of other people just to like check on Candace, and he told them no sirens. Like, no sirens, please just come peacefully. And the sergeant like just didn't care. He was like, yeah, I know you said that, but I wanted to piss you off. And they came just like blaring down the neighborhood. I was like, what kind of respect does a coroner hold then? Or did he just have like a lot of beef with the sergeant? Like, I don't know. It was like, that's just on the topic of politicalness of it all, because that was also strange.
Not only that, but it really puts into perspective like how much personal relationships between like the coroner and officers and stuff have in situations like that, where it's not like strictly this is protocol, this is what we do. It's like, no, there are situations where they're just going to be petty and not respect the families, and it just, that pissed me off.
Yeah. And that's a big thing. I mean, Holmes was talking about teaching people too exactly how to speak to family members. Do not say like there was an accident, say they were killed or they died, because those harsher words will kind of move along the process quicker, I guess, if that's like the best way to explain it. Learned some about the human body. Rebecca knows that I know nothing about the human body, but I would love to.
I had one note about the book that I really appreciated, or that stuck with me. Is it okay if I say it real quick?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Just talk.
Okay. I think it really touched me when he talked about that story about that like one suicide when they like couldn't figure out who it was, and it was like this whole saga for like, I think it was years. It took a while to like find out who he was, and then when they finally got to contact his family in Germany and like say what happened to him, like just kind of seeing that the family being able to have closure, because of course there was a lot of stories where there wasn't closure, where they couldn't figure out what had happened, couldn't find the body. But I thought that really spoke a lot, because like, I mean, everyone's imperfect, and I definitely saw some of Holmes' imperfections in the book, but that spoke a lot about his character, that he was trying so hard to pursue for this family to have closure.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating, because he didn't give up. Like he was like pushing and trying everything he could to get this family closure, which actually brought up another question I had that could definitely, offer varying opinions. But one thing that Holmes said, and I think this would definitely, obviously he would say this, but he said all families should have closure on like a loved one's death. But it got me thinking that if somebody like really wanted to just vanish, similar to the German, I believe he was German guy did, is that okay for him to just fulfill what he wanted and not necessarily inform people? Like, do family members have to know these things if a person has made a decision where they just kind of want to vanish? And because, I feel like if somebody that was like their dying wish is to literally just vanish, then that kind of should be fulfilled. And that sounds really harsh and that sounds really morbid, and I apologize, but it's like, I don't know, while I was reading that, I was like, it kind of doesn't, like, I understand the need to like put a name to a victim, especially if they're like, unidentified, and we need to at least figure out what happened. But if that was like in their note or something, like, and it's interesting. And too, there was a story later on where the boy later, one of the later chapters, one of the kids killed himself, and he wrote 2 letters, one to his girlfriend and one to everyone. And then the grandmother, who had custody of it and wanted to be the mother and caused a frenzy about her being his mother, and she'd been lying to everybody for years about it, she didn't get a note. Therefore, she only got to read the one addressed to everyone. And she fought poor girlfriend to read what, you know, he had wrote to the girlfriend, which I don't know. It had me thinking of, you know, really dark, deep questions like that. Like, does everybody have a right to know, or is it just, you know, anyway. So that was one of the questions that I had that I can remember at least.
On a completely different topic and completely like change of what you were just talking about, but with the whole prison and San Quentin thing, can we talk about how crazy it was? Like how these prisoners smuggle and like hide these weapons and stuff, like razor blades.
And then
That
like hiding stuff up their butt. Ooh.
Yeah. I listened to the audiobook and I was cringing the entire time.
Hang on, let me see. I wrote that somewhere because he was literally like naming things that could be a weapon. And I was like, I would have never thought that. Yeah, I really want a whole book on just San Quentin now.
It was the guy who sharpened both ends of his toothbrush into like a mini shank, and then they found it in his rectum during the autopsy.
Yeah. Wow. People. Christ.
Desperate times.
I don't know. And also like them, I think at one point the author said they could get access to guns. Like it's rare that I think he said something like it was rare that the prisoner would have a gun, but it's not like impossible or something like that. And I'm like, how? Who's giving guns to these people? How are they able to get this in there? And also, oh my goodness. What are you doing? You want to say hi? You scared the shit out of me. Okay. This is Hank. Hank's my best friend. Also them Holmes talking about walking on different levels, but having to stay close to the cells because people would sling poop at him. Didn't know that. That was new. Yeah, I need to look and see if that book is about the prison system in general, because I'm pretty sure it is. And we could definitely check that one out. I knew about Lividity because of Heyman Lee, if anybody's listened to Serial. Knew all about Lividity and what exactly that was, which is how we know Heyman Lee was moved. That's the only scientific part of this that I was like, I know that. Let's see. Yeah, watch where you walk. Oxygen. Jaw is the strongest muscle. Liver is the densest. Didn't know that. Government budgets. I was complaining about that at one point. Yeah, I didn't realize this was as political as it was either. I wrote the Carol story. Why was she cremated so soon? I think that was interesting too. Was that page like 70 something? Why they wouldn't, obviously you wouldn't cremate a body until you were certain and had like a death certificate. So some of these stories, the word autopsy means see for yourself. I think it was the story of the model, I believe, who was cremated like before they were done with the investigation, which just made it all more suspicious. So that would make sense. Why wouldn't you wait until it was completely done? Yeah, and the autopsy is just being expensive and them not doing it unless they absolutely have to. That's awful. Well, I love that. I found myself looking for boogeymen when there were none to be found. Oh, here's the one I hated. Here's a page 94. The housekeeper weighed over 300 pounds. She wasn't someone most men would hit on. Great.
as a basis for an official investigation.
Yeah.
Oh, she's not attractive, so I determined that therefore this story is not plausible.
He always said that too. Like anytime he was talking about a female, attractive was always in there. That just is not relevant. Why?
Well, I think the author was kind of being very just reporter, journalist, and kind of saying, "This is what this guy said," and so yeah, Holmes was definitely painted, I think, the way he deserved to be painted at times. There was that one section where they were talking about, whenever there was a killing in Marin, especially a crime in which suspects were African American, it was standard practice for the police to position a patrol car at the foot of the Richmond San Rafael Bridge. Cops didn't think of it as racial profiling. Rather, they were just playing the odds.
Literally, my note says, sounds like profiling.
Yeah.
Page 225. Yeah, sounds like profiling.
I mean, you can actually hear the sarcasm in the author's voice going, yeah, okay.
I do agree. I think it's at parts he was just kind of saying, well, this is what the guy said. I mean, I really don't think anything, some parts though, yeah, I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but yeah, I literally have that note. Sounds like
I think that it's interesting, like when we're telling a story, is saying the person's gender or their race necessary for the story? Like even when he was talking about the holdup, like that was Holmes's words paraphrased, but he still felt it necessary to say two African American men. Why? They could have just been two men or two people, like, like there's no reason to, like, I don't know. And it just, there were a lot, and it's like when he would always specify a female prosecutor, we didn't need to specify female. Like Patches said, you could have just said a prosecutor, because then everything that followed stating female prosecutor was like, this woman would wanted to placate angry mother, and that is what cost Holmes, this great coroner who's only done good throughout his career, to ultimately end his career. So it just really didn't, and I think it, as a reader, it definitely tinted my perspective moving forward, imagining this female supervisor instead of just a genderless supervisor, because of the way that we perceive women in roles of power. And that wasn't Holmes' storytelling, that was Bateson's storytelling, because it was paraphrased. He could have reasonably left that out of the story. But
that's an extremely good point. You're right. That's yeah.
What are you doing? I heard him chewing on something. There's only wires over there. Yeah, I always underlined that or noted that, because there was no point to specifying some of those times, unless again it was absolutely necessary, unless we truly needed to know that this person was African American. But there really wasn't a point that I saw that. Sorry, that's the heat again, or the air conditioning.
And it really distracted from what I thought was otherwise great storytelling. Everything about the content of what the book is supposed to be about was fascinating. And then it just took me so out of it every time it happened. I was like, oh, I hate this because I'm so interested, but also I feel peeved. I don't know.
No, I agree.
Same. I would have to stop and be like, oh, okay, wait, hang on, let me get back to the story, because that came out of, it got me on a whole different train of thought. I'm like, wow, okay, let me get back into the story.
Because he would say female prosecutor and she would do this. And I'm like, then you really didn't need saying she gives us, or the female police officer, the female, and I was like, there's really no need for this. Like, there's really, truly no need for this. I'm so glad that y'all are saying that, because while reading it again, I was like, I just feel like I'm trying to find things and they're going to think I'm crazy and just picking at random stuff. But one other thing I really wanted was, and that was actually one of the discussion questions, is what did you feel this book was lacking? And to me, I just wanted more statistics, I guess. And we got that in the Golden Gate Bridge suicide part of it, where we learned 75% of jumps are witnessed. And I wrote these down because I didn't know these things. Like, these were interesting. Only 5% of bodies have water in their lungs. There's a 4-second fall at 75 miles per hour. I kind of wanted just more facts, I guess, like that when it comes to certain deaths, and specifically the way, cases that Holmes would investigate, of course, but just something a little bit more scientific and less anecdotal, I think, is what I was wanting. And by the end of it, I was like, well, you should have known, like, this was just a book about obviously it says on the back of the book, this is about Marin County. I should have known that going in, but at the same time, I wanted just a little bit more facts and a little bit more just
A broader perspective.
yeah, like just something a little, but also, I want a book on weird shit that's happened to the coroner in like a small town in Pennsylvania. So I think John Bates in here, the author, had a lot to work with when talking to Holmes, to the point where, of course, he would write a book about it. But I think I wanted more on just maybe what it's like to be a coroner in different, which is something Caitlin Dowdy would probably write about. She probably has, but just coroners in different countries, or like, how do they have coroners in this, or what exactly is the statistics on that, I guess. And I obviously was not going to get that in this book, so it's something that I would like to further investigate. But I did find myself kind of researching other things that I wish we got in the book.
It would also be cool to have like an entire book of like creepy stories from coroners, like just like the weirdest deaths or like the weirdest situations. Yeah.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Which I think we got some, but
I think the suicide was so heavy because Bateson himself hasn't, like, his background is in suicide and like suicide crisis prevention. So I feel like that's why that section was as robust as it was. I feel like it definitely, even if it felt kind of like a biography about Holmes with like Bateson's own personal interests emphasized. I feel like it could have benefited from like interviewing other people who like are major play, because one thing that became abundantly clear is that it's not just the coroner or the assistant coroner, it's your like lab techs, it's the person who performs the autopsy, it's the sheriff's office. Like, if he had interviewed other people, I feel like the book could have been a lot more educational for like what a death investigation actually entails, and then we would have gotten a little bit more of the science too, because Holmes didn't really do any of the science. Like, he did a little bit of science, but he didn't do like autopsies. So I feel like it could have benefited from like, many more perspectives than just the one person.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, the cat keeps biting on cords and I'm afraid he's going to kill himself. Stop it. I agree. And I think, lessons in investigating death is, we need that kind of perspective. So I totally agree. I did find the Final Destination deaths interesting. The wrong place, wrong time deaths. Because how could you even investigate something like that? A woman is just sitting on her front porch, like watching her neighbor do something stupid and then wind up decapitated in the process. Hey, would you get out of there, please? Please, I love you so much. You're going to kill yourself.
I feel like there were also almost like two books going on in this one book. Like, he could have split it up and had the more like sciencey part, interviewed more people, like Rebecca said, and do more like deep dive of cases, like bigger ones, and then have like another book on Holmes's like philosophy on death, because I thought that was very interesting on the stuff that he's learned about dealing with families and grief and everything. And I almost feel like those could have been like two separate books.
And then another book on San Quentin.
Another book on San Quentin. So I thought it was kind of muddled, and he could have organized it a little bit better that way. It would have been really interesting and get other people's perspectives in both areas. Right.
And I think after how did you get in there again? I closed the door. Psychopath. I thought it was interesting, which I don't even know if it would have worked, but there's like 4 or 5 different ways a person can be declared deceased. I'm pretty sure it's like natural causes, suicide, homicide, undetermined, or something like that. Why didn't you split the book up by ways of death, if that makes sense? Why didn't you, like, here's a bunch of stories on homicides, here's a bunch of stories on suicides, here's a bunch of unnatural deaths that are undetermined. That maybe would have made more sense in the way I would have categorized things, but I understand that might have not have worked. But again, this isn't to say that I did enjoy the book. I want to specify that and like put that out there. I did learn a lot. It frustrated me a lot, again, like Rebecca was saying, with how this was so political, because, you know, that's not at the fault of the author or Holmes. It's just I didn't know any of this stuff. But at the same time, I did find a lot of things very problematic with it. Just wanted to put that out there. I feel like I'm just dogging on it, and I'm like, no, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it. But there were a lot of things that I disliked about it. There's my note, page 177. Are all coroners required to do autopsies, branch and level? Oh, the story about the brothers who robbed the bank. And the teller at the bank said she made 4 phone calls. The first 3 were to the farmers at every corner of the town, and the last one was to the police. And I was like, that's brilliant. I love that. But there was that one part where I was like, I don't understand who exactly does what still. When I first became coroner, I had been doing everything for 14 years already, except for autopsies. It was no big deal. And I was like, reel it back. Do they typically do autopsies? Because then that would make them, you know, scientifically knowledgeable on things.
Now that's something I don't know. Is there a difference between coroner and medical examiner? Is that, I guess those are 2 distinguished different things, but I don't really remember the words medical examiner, at least maybe in Marin County, it's just different. I don't remember that term being used a lot, but obviously if you pay attention to the news, or especially any big cases, a lot of times you hear the phrase medical examiner used quite a bit and not coroner.
He does talk about it in the first chapter, like he kind of glosses over it.
Okay.
He says on page 12, like coroners are either elected by the populace or appointed by designated entities. In the highest form, coroners are medical examiners, meaning they're licensed physicians who can perform autopsies, basically, because they're certified in forensic pathology. Most people assume that all coroners are medical examiners, but that's not true. Many coroners are medical examiners, but many coroners are also not medical examiners. So like in many counties and communities, the coroner isn't required to have any medical training at all, much less a medical degree. They just need to have a clean record, be 21 or older, and have a high school diploma. And some counties don't even require that. And I think, so it depends on like,
wow,
county coroner, or like if they're employed by the state versus the county is different. But if the coroner doesn't have any kind of medical degree, then I think they have to like outsource the medical examination part to like a private company or someone who does do that sort of thing and is licensed to do that.
Kind of like all roses are flowers, but not all flowers are roses, sort of thing.
There you go. Yeah, I devoured the book at the very beginning of the month, and so I had totally forgotten about that. Thank you.
It was like it's literally 2 paragraphs. So
yeah, exactly, and there were several other paragraphs after that. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Many coroners are licensed physicians who have no training in forensics.
I know.
How? I've taken a forensics class, and you learn a lot as far as like blood splatter, guns, death, which I feel like a coroner should know how to do. And I'm not saying that they typically don't, but I feel like that would at least be, I don't know, like a basic class that you would have to take.
It makes it seem like being a coroner is a largely administrative role where you're like moving all the different chess pieces, but you're not actually doing anything yourself, is kind of what I interpreted.
It's bananas. It's absolutely bananas.
I also think a lot of places have coroners, like politically wise, because it's cheaper. Because think about it, like a medical examiner requires so many more degrees and so much more like knowledge that they usually have to be in a place that's like bigger, has more money, and is willing to pay them. Versus coroners, you could kind of just stick the sheriff up there and he's the county coroner too, especially in like small towns.
Marion County didn't even have, sorry, I'm just now checking the TikTok live feed. I couldn't see the messages or the comments that I was getting. Marion County didn't even have a morgue because it was too expensive.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting because Marion County is like the top, like most of their cities are super rich, like wealthy.
But what do you, I mean, see, he go over, what exactly do they do if they need to hold a body at one point? And they did kind of brush over the part about, okay, what if there's a huge, this is California, y'all have earthquakes all the time. What if there's a huge natural disaster? I think he literally had to ask like meat trucks, right? Am I making that up? Because I
think so.
Beer companies. Meat trucks is what they did in New York during COVID. Because that was real. That's a real life example. Yeah. I would love to know how the New York City coroner handled that. That's a great book.
I feel like that's going to take years to process for them.
Even like,
I'm sure there's some books being fast tracked about that as we speak.
That's what I was going to say. I'm sure we'll have an option for that soon.
Honestly, I would read it though. It's morbid, but I would read it because I'm fascinated with how, I think, where was it where the smoke, there was like a county where like they had like really bad smoke for a while and they didn't know what was happening. They constantly thought something was on fire. No, it was the crematory. Overloaded with bodies, and the town was like thinking that people were just, somebody was like constantly burning leaves or something like that, which is the best smell in the world. I doubt that's what it smelled like, but they were like, something smells like really like there's a lot of smoke. I don't know where it was, but that's a thing. Yeah, I totally read a book about COVID deaths and how they handle just the mass amounts of people. I did appreciate also, I have a note that just says never go alone. Every now and again, I don't know if you can see it, I would make a little red flag and I put them up around the book because sometimes it'd be like, I just left my friend at a bar to go home with a stranger. And I'm like, God damn it, people. Buddy system, if I've taught you anything. In my 1 year on TikTok.
Reminded me how dangerous the 70s and 80s were for like women specifically. Like all of these terrifying murders happened in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yeah, and I appreciate them. I appreciate the authors and Holmes not necessarily discussing the biggest cases. I know he didn't deal with Tupac, right? But he dealt with like the death that Tupac was allegedly involved in with his cousin, I believe.
Yeah, because Tupac was killed in Vegas, so They wouldn't have dealt with. Yeah, so it's ugh. Yeah, I feel like there were some of the big cases. He was like, oh yeah, I dealt with that, but then I was like, okay. I want to, and then it would just move on to something else. So I'm kind of with you guys. And sometimes I was like, where's the other chapters? I want to know more about that. You said, oh yeah, I dealt with that.
That was no big deal.
That was interesting too, because I was thinking throughout the entire book, what kind of like privacy, were any names changed?
Did you ask any of these people if you could write a book about them?
It says at the beginning that there were some names changed. I was just actually reading the first, because when you were reading, the reason I asked was curious was when you were reading that paragraph about the medical examiners, it doesn't match my copy of the book, which freaked me out. So I was wondering what if I have an earlier.
I mean, I was paraphrasing a lot.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I was
not reading verbatim. I'm sorry.
Okay. I thought maybe this was like the Bible and that I had like the King James version of the education of a coroner and not the new American Bible version or something.
No. Oh man, I was gonna get a new copy of this too, because this is, I think I showed you guys last time, this is the book that got stuck to the previously library book, and it like ripped the back off of it, and I was like devastated. I was like, my book can't look like this. But after reading it, I'm like, it's fine. I didn't love it, but it's fine. Oh gosh, now you have me worried that like, did we get different editions? Like, wait a minute.
That's what I was confused about. I was like, wait a minute, huh? This is not, this changes everything.
That would almost explain why I didn't remember anything about the medical
you go.
exam and everything. I was like, that explains it. Oh no, I guess it doesn't. Okay, I just forgot.
Somewhere where he took female out entirely. Like, thank God.
Yeah. It's the 2021 version. It's like completely much more appropriate. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, page 219, I have just call her cop. Because I think he just said female cop. And under it, I said, Thomas was so great. Here are a couple stories about how he was a womanizer. Oh, I was so mad. I don't even think I read that entirely. I don't even know what happened in that chapter. I got like a page in and I was like, okay, I'm done with this. Also, a little dated. He was using the word prostitution quite a bit. And I know that is now, we do not say that anymore. It is very, what's the word I'm trying to look for? Starts with a D. Demean? No, it's not, we call them sex workers now. So that was, of course, just I think a dated term. How is this not enough evidence? Red flag, ladies. I need to start taking better notes. It just says the most random scatterbrain shit. Wow, I opened that right to the page I needed. Why stats now? Almost. Oh, there's a bunch. Oh yeah, there was a random section on the chapter 18, page 227 about Marin County's like how it was gentrified and like here's all the statistics on Marin County, and I feel like we needed that on page 1. More than 37% of Marin County residents live below the poverty line, compared with 8% for the county. Yeah, just a lot about Marin County all of a sudden that I just felt like was needed forever ago.
That's like what you were saying about like just how it's laid out and everything. It's like all the information is there and all the things that we want to know are there. It's just scattered and not like where it should be to read smoothly, if that makes sense. Like,
didn't feel like a smooth read. Like that's like the best way to explain it.
And sometimes I wonder if this is a situation where because it said he interviewed him over the course of what, like a year and a half, wasn't it? Like several times over a year. And I kind of wonder if it sometimes feels like he said basically took his notes from all of those different encounters and jumbled them all together and just handed it to his editor and says, here, fix it. And this is what we got. And I still love the book, but it was, you're right. In terms of chronological and even thematically, it bounced around quite a bit.
I also didn't, since I don't know, a lot of people have asked me like, what's your theories on Tupac? I really don't know that much about it, but the whole situation where stepbrother was arrested for firing the gun, but many people believe that he took the fall in order to protect his famous relative. I had a note that just says, how do you just drop a gun? Which was interesting. I wonder if Tupac did shoot the kid. I love that. What can you tell us about Jerry Garcia? Jerry who? She said. She didn't know who the Grateful Dead were. She knew who they were, but she didn't know the lead singer or the lead man. Same. I mean, I would have said Jerry who. Over the court. See, I wanted stuff like this. Like, what are you doing? I wanted more stuff like this. One of the courses that he took years earlier at the police academy provided tips in dealing with the media. Awesome. Give me more of that. This cat is going to be the death of me. Don't feel like you're snowballing them. The instructor said that the investigators shouldn't try to block reporters' access by telling them to stay behind police barricades. Typically after death, reporters go to the police first for information. They are told that everything is under investigation pending the outcome of the autopsy, however, which sends them racing to the coroner's office because each one wants to get the scoop. I didn't know that. Despite having nothing else to report, the media camped outside the coroner's office for the next 8 hours. This is still on Jerry Garcia, which is crazy.
I think an issue I did have with the book, kind of along the lines of what y'all were saying, was like, I mean, the facts of the case were the facts of the cases in different situations, but I felt like there was kind of a lack of empathetic storytelling, especially when it came to women and people of color. So like that was tough, because that wasn't only Kenneth Holmes, it's also how the author wrote it,
Mhm.
just like some of the, I mean, obviously some of the things Kenneth Holmes did say / did do, but just how it was written at times, I mean, that like really irked me. So I definitely understand where you were coming from when you were saying earlier, I hope I'm not the only person picking it apart, because I think we all were in some way. And on a random note, this has nothing to do with anything, but it's an interesting fact. You know how he like brought up random famous cases?
Mhm.
So my dad lived in Monterey Park when the Night Stalker was active, and he was married and had 2 kids. So he remembers having to like lock the windows the entire summer. And then does everyone know who Rodney Alcala is, the dating game killer?
Mhm.
Yeah, my dad's classmate dated him when she was in high school. Yeah, he didn't kill her though, so she survived. Thank God.
Part of me,
That's good.
part of me kind of wanted, because there was brief mentions of like Ted Bundy and the Green River Killer, which I've done a video about that, how they are, how Ted Bundy literally helped them figure out who the Green River Killer was, Gary Ridgway. I kind of wanted more. I mean, I know a lot of people are tired of talking about Ted Bundy and they're tired of hearing about Jeffrey Dahmer, but at the same time, like, I still eat that shit up and I still want to learn as much about that, because kind of like,
Yeah, they're fascinating for a reason.
so I mean, fascinating and like seen as like the golden age of serial killing, because like you were saying, Rebecca, like it's crazy what people would do in the 70s. Like people used to hitchhike. It's like I would have liked to hear more stories about that, and I would have liked to hear more about kind of those people that we are familiar with. Obviously, those were not dealt with in Marion County, so that wasn't going to be a thing. But and again, maybe not a lot of people would have picked that up. So like, oh God, another book on Ted Bundy. But still, like I would have been fascinated by that. Also didn't know this. Once they leave, they can never view the scene again the way it was when the person died. Even if the scene is sealed, meaning that no one other than the coroner can enter legally, it wouldn't be the same. Videotape provides, when he got in trouble talking about the chief's dating life. Oh man, it hurt to read that. Oh, it hurt. I was like, how did they, like, where's this going? Like, how did they mess this up? Like, did they film something they weren't supposed to? And yeah, I was like, felt the pain from reading that. And Holmes was respectable to like go straight to the chief and be like, I'm so sorry, even though the chief did not want to talk to him. So yeah, I didn't know that only the coroner can legally enter home again, which he did seem to do. Sometimes he would just go back to the scene, which is interesting. Also, page 307. Another cost-cutting move was to reduce the number of autopsies that were performed in the county. I mentioned this earlier. The stated rationale was that they weren't necessary, but the real reason, Holmes believed, was that autopsies are expensive. And from the sheriff's point of view, only worth doing in homicide cases. That's not surprising, although Holmes said that Holmes had cases where police officers were quick to attribute someone's death to a manner other than homicide so that they didn't have to investigate. In the 1980s, we were called to a house where a man was found dead on the floor of his kitchen. He had been stabbed 3 times in the heart, once in the lung, and once in the belly. Police found the knife that had been used. It had been washed off in the sink. There were some small drops in there, then put back on a magnetic knife rack. 3 cops were at the scene, and they discussed at length the angle of the knife for each piercing. They dusted the knife for fingerprints, and it had been wiped clean. The blood in the sink proved that to be that of the descendant. The police couldn't develop any other scenario or suspect, so they decided that it must have been suicide, and he stabbed himself. Wiped the knife, returned it to its holder, cleaned the sink, then laid on the floor and died. They concluded in their report that it was a suicide, even though we said it was undetermined and probable homicide. Thankfully, in today's world, the police would never do that. City chiefs and sheriffs wouldn't allow it. A man stabs himself 5 times, then has the wherewithal to rinse the knife dry it, hang back on the rack before he staggers around and dies. It's impossible. It's not impossible, actually, is what the author says. It's not impossible. He could have really had a solid heart, and the knife went in cleanly and came out so cleanly that there was only a little blood. But I found that interesting, that literally they just didn't want to deal with it, and they couldn't figure out who could have been responsible. I love that. This was problematic. No shit.
The same with the lady in the bathtub. I mean, there were bloody fingerprints on the side of the tub, and they still just, it was suicide.
Blows my mind.
Makes you wonder how many cases
Oh yeah.
just got shoved under the rug. Like,
Yeah.
And how many cases, going back to, classism, racism, and everything like that. How many cases based on socioeconomic status, race, whatever. They're just like, yeah, who's gonna care anyway?
Going back to the case in San Quentin, the death that he investigated, where they were like, oh, he just had a bad heart, and then it turned out that it was that the prison guards' wrongful actions brought about his unnecessary death, and they were just like, yeah, we're just not gonna pursue it. Like, no, that's fine. Like, that's messed up. That's really messed up. Like, even if the person was on death row and the rationale is like, well, they were gonna die anyway. It's like,
well, didn't they even say that he was on death row, but he was like pardoned, or I don't remember the exact term, but like they didn't read his paperwork or whatever. Like he was supposed to be freed or something, and they just were like, eh.
yeah, he like, with his lawyers were like, his lawyers had sent him papers that said he was supposed to be free, and they just never delivered it.
Well,
Which
his
again,
lawyer
was a
even
chapter that was like, I want a book about the
Yeah.
prison system because this is messed up.
I'm gonna look that up. Yeah, I forgot about that completely because he really brushed over that, where they were like, yeah, he was actually supposed to be freed. Like,
And then he
didn't
always, like, wrapped it up at the end with like, yeah, like he was on death row though, so like it's fine. It's like, no, it's not.
he completely imply also that his lawyer just kind of botched his entire case? Like there was another guy and they just, we're good. We got the guy.
I gotta go, but it was so nice to meet all of you, and I look forward to joining another meeting soon.
Thank you, Giselle. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
yes. So the book is called "Waiting for an Echo" by Christine Montross. Waiting for an Echo is a riveting, rarely seen glimpse into American jails and prisons. It is also a damning account of policies that have criminalized mental illness, shifting large numbers of people who belong in therapeutic settings into punitive ones. She has spent most of her career treating the most severely ill psychiatric patients. So it's more so about people incarcerated when they should be getting help. But I did recently purchase this book, and it's definitely something we can check out. I think I heard it on like the radio when I was living in LA, and I was like, yeah, I gotta get that. Yeah, I actually completely forgot about that part where he was just supposed to be freed. Completely forgot about that. I also think it's fascinating how you can totally determine the race, age, and almost height of a person simply by their bones. That one was crazy, where the woman was buried really close to the older woman was buried really close to the house. And they were able to determine that she was Caucasian, female, about 5'4" and this much. And I was like, and they were pretty much right on the money. And I was like,
I was missing her skull, which is like a big, like the axial skeleton tells a lot. I mean, they could determine sex from that, but like missing the skull is like a big piece of the puzzle.
I would just love to know that stuff. Like how?
I feel like a book on forensic anthropology would also be super fascinating.
Oh,
Or there's the fictional one, the Bones, Kathy Reich's books. There used to be that show.
yeah.
Yeah. But that's always been really fascinating. It really is. And even like here recently with the Brian Laundrie, all that whole Gabby Petito thing, how much that played into them determining who he was, that was him, and the cause of death eventually.
And I tell you what, I'm really tired of like I'm really tired of that case for just the wrong reasons right now. But it's just like there's so many theories out there with that case, and it boggles me that people are like, not believing that it's him. And it's just, I've been avoiding TikTok, I think, for like the past 3 months, just because there's too much happening, and I can't keep up with Gabby Petito or any of the Brian Laundrie theories, because there's like just facts to this, and those are being blatantly ignored. So that one And I will get random messages from people that I haven't spoken to in years that are like, so what do you think of this Gabby Petito thing? And I'm like, damn it. Why? But I think like it's a really interesting and very I don't want to say visual, but I want to say visual because we have body cam footage take on how the police treat domestic violence cases. And I think that is wildly ignored and incredibly sad, because those two should have never been put in the same room after that. And I
And
feel,
child abuse.
oh my God. Yeah, I feel like it's just getting ignored because people are getting so wrapped up in the mystery of things that it's like, can we focus on the fact that this was like really bad domestic violence? And like, I don't know, it's infuriating. It's infuriating, especially the mediums that are getting on TikTok. They're like, I think he's dead. And it's like, that's really damaging. Back to females. Page 45 of my note is, why did boob size matter? Which I don't even remember what that was in context of.
I liked your one note that just said bruh.
Oh, did you see that on the book? Or where did you see that?
I think it was on, you had a notepad or something.
I do have in like almost capital letters here. This book is frustrating in really big letters there. Yeah, some parts really infuriated me. Oh, the Mormons. That one was crazy too. Elvin Bishop's wife and kid. Whoa, didn't know that. It's news to me. Let's see. Why did boob size matter? Oh, I'm not even on the right page. Christ almighty. I just have in the book, written by a male. 5 years later, with her natural size 36 breasts enlarged through silicone injections to size 44 and her frame skyrocketing. Awesome. That's a crossed out
Yeah,
process.
the whole thing about the pornographers, I was like, this is a really interesting story, like a really interesting, messed up, creepy story that is just riddled with problematic statements that are just ruining it for me.
Yeah.
Because it was in like all the cases where he was talking about, you know, like these people had a plan. They were gonna like kill these people. This was their motive, was to get all this money, and like they were gonna collect the life insurance or whatever. There were a lot of those that I thought were interesting, and surprisingly didn't think that they were super redundant, because even though they kind of like the context of them kind of was, they also kind of were each unique in their own. I wanted more of that. I wanted, like, I could have had like 3 chapters on the Trailside Killer for sure.
Oh yeah.
I wanted more. I felt like it was really fast. It was so fast I couldn't keep track of like the names. I was like chronologically super confused about what happened. So I wish there's been more of that.
Because that was the one where they just kind of stumbled on 2 other people that weren't victims of the Trailside Killer, right? Or they were, like, they just happened to find 2 more people in their search for 2 other people.
Yeah, I think he ended up being convicted for their murders as well. But then I also was like, this doesn't match like the MO of his other crimes. So like, how did you determine that he was the one who killed them? And there wasn't a lot of information about this. Like, yeah, they decided that he killed them.
Yeah.
Like, but how?
Yeah. And there was that one chapter too where a baby washed up on shore, and then they found a hunter was just going to take a leak and then happened to stumble on a boot or something, and they found the mother. And then it went into Holmes's like theorizing about the bodies, and then it was like, well, he must have put him in a freezer for 2 years, and then he must have done this with it. And I'm like, whoa. How did we get here? Like, how did you come to that assumption? But in the end, it eventually made sense. But yeah, some parts were like kind of made sense, but some parts were like that where I do felt it was rushed, because maybe he clearly had more dense stories than others in parts, and you can definitely kind of tell where some of the stories were lacking and tell where some of the stories were
This is the bibliography we're working with. This is how many cases he went through. Poured, like, can you imagine reading all of these cases? I think he said there was like 800.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I was
he just-
surprised. I was reading it on Kindle on my phone, and I got to 80% of the book done, and that was like the end of the book, and I was like, "There's 20% more. What's going on?" And I just sit there and scrolled through all of the cases, and I was like, "That's 20% of the book. Okay."
Which is crazy because it doesn't feel like 20%. I mean, it's a good chunk, but like, good Lord. Yeah, I did look through this in the back and I just thought it was interesting, but that's, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is like investigative journalism
Yeah.
in a book. Like, this is a lot of research for him to have done. I feel like it's the fact that it is messy is a consequence of that, of how the sheer volume of cases that he had to go through and decide which ones were the most interesting. And
And some of them Holmes will just remember. Like, did I tell you about this case? Or did I tell you about
Yeah.
Obviously, some of them stuck with them, which I would have imagined so. Oh, and here was another note. Was this something coroners typically did? Like, anyway, go ahead. You're about to.
Oh, I was just thinking it's probably very possible too that, you know, the publisher was like, yeah, you need to turn in a 300-page book.
Sure.
Because no one's going to read a 400 to 600-page book. We would, but we're in the morbidly curious book club, so that we're a very niche thing right there.
Couldn't do it about the Salem witch trials, but I would be able to do it about this.
Absolutely. If he just cut off with the sexist, misogynistic, you know, language a little bit, I think we'd be in a better shape.
We started the last meeting and I held up my book and I only had like the bookmark was like right here for my October book about the witch trials. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to discuss this, but I didn't come anywhere close to finishing it because I think it was 400 pages and the trials start on page like 215. And I was like, fuck, I'm not going to get through this, man. This is huge. Funny thing about the pornographers is they were getting slapped with lawsuits on obscenity and related charges, many of them resulting from vice raids on their theaters. I didn't think that was like illegal. Like, could you get in trouble for like showing that kind of stuff? I don't know. Like, I didn't know anything about the laws of that. With the help of high-priced legal assistance, they successfully defeated each lawsuit they were thrown at. The two pornography kings. Yeah, that was pretty fascinating. I honestly forgot about it until you had mentioned it, Rebecca. Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Ralph. Go ahead.
Being a little bit older, I remember in the 80s and the 90s. You know, we're talking Jerry Falwell and the Moral Majority. Robert Mapplethorpe, who was a photographer artist, he was trying to bring a show into Cincinnati. I'm originally from Ohio, and they weren't going to let him do it because of morality laws that they had for morality and decency laws that they had on the books, either in the state of Ohio or in the city of Cincinnati. So I think a lot of times these specific types of laws have been used to shut down these type of theaters, whatnot. But I think almost at every turn, if they have the money, they can take it to the all the way up to Supreme Court, and they'll, obviously the First Amendment, there's a lot of protections there. So, but I do remember that being a big thing in the 80s and 90s. These, morality police basically saying, we don't want that in our town.
Yeah, right. Satanic panic. We love to hear him. Still alive and well today. And I'm just now seeing this note, and I feel like similar to the book, we're going back and forth on topics. But I think the biggest problem here is it was labeled more so as something that I would have been interested in and should have been titled, and which it wouldn't have done as well. But it should have been titled and marketed, I guess, as a biography, or essentially like, just a book about this coroner's life. And again, it's on the back. I should have known that, but it would have been, it was getting increasingly boring after a while. And again, misogynistic and sexist, but it should have just been labeled and sold as a bio just about Holmes, like about, with his face on the cover or something, like that's what it felt like I was reading, was essentially just, which it's fine. It just wasn't what I was expecting. And yes, I did learn a lot from it. However, I did have, the problems with it. But yeah, this came up like a lot of interesting political discussions on like the death sentence and assisted suicide, and had some really fascinating topics, and we don't have to discuss them here because they're very dark topics. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had. If I were to rate it, I would give it maybe a 6 out of 10. Didn't hate it, didn't love it. So yeah, if you guys had anything else, my final thoughts were, last couple chapters again were the best and most crucial. It really brought it home well. Didn't really care. I mean, I kind of cared what Holmes was doing now as in retirement, I guess, because it's interesting to see. It was interesting at least to hear his take on death and life and exactly, how he feels, and the fact that people are still reaching out to him to cover certain cases, specifically reporters. Like, I thought that was interesting. And I didn't really know. Did I leave? It said my internet connection was unstable. Did I like vanish for a second there? Cool.
Just you pause for just a second.
Thanks. Yeah, and it definitely was written by a white male. That's another note that I have. But other than that, that's pretty much all I had. If you guys wanted to say anything else, it seems like we were all kind of on the same page. I'm really glad you guys enjoyed it, though. Of course, that's, my biggest worry is we pick up a book that everybody hates. But again, it would be a good discussion otherwise. So, yeah, if anybody had anything else.
I agree. I definitely learned a lot. It's very educational. I think it frustrated me in ways that are positive, because now I know about some like injustices that are occurring in the coroner's office, which I didn't realize was going to be a thing.
There's another thing to be mad about.
Like, I feel more educated now. Like, yeah, I disagreed with some ways the narrative was told, but otherwise I feel like I only positively benefited from reading this book. So
I agree. Yeah, Hank agrees too.
I think it was a fascinating look at grief too, like, and what role a coroner plays, especially in a very tragic death, or unexpected death. And I agree with you, Patricia, that those last two chapters, when he was reflecting back on his life and his career, and the times when he would have to go and share for these folks the absolute worst news of their lives, and that was, I think those are the things that hit me the most with those. Those were I think the heaviest chapters too, when he was really reflecting back on that
and hoping that everything was truthful. Another the thing we didn't take into consideration. It seems like Holmes really was meant for this job, and I think that is interesting too, and that's something that they mentioned too. Like, this isn't necessarily somebody's calling, but to some people it is, and they're very good at it. And again, if all of these quotes and all of these memories and anecdotes are true, Holmes was very good at his job. And I think he was fascinating to learn about. I kind of just wanted to learn about other Holmes and other counties and states and different ways that cities or states approach, because I'm sure there's different laws all over the place when it comes to stuff like this. So be interesting. I do, yes, want to look into Waiting for an Echo, and that's specifically about America's incarceration. And also San Quentin. There's a book about San Quentin, let me know. Because I feel like some things were brushed over that I would love to learn about, specifically the drug trade that is happening in San Quentin. But yeah, is there anything else? Anybody else had anything to say? All good. Okay, so I already started reading December's book. I don't know what month we're on. December's book. Holy shit. This is really good so far. Even the introduction, I'm like, oh great, we already have something to discuss. Very well written, very easy to follow. I don't have my black sticky notes with me, but I'm definitely going to have them ready. However, I do have pink that seem to match the body that we have here, which is very satisfying. So I'm very excited to get into this. I feel like it's going to be perfect for this book club. and hopefully bring up some discussions that aren't going to be too crazy, because this one definitely focuses on the morally ambiguous medical practice that I love reading about, but I feel like a lot of people are going to disagree with some of the things in this book, so we'll see how it goes. But anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out. This is a treat. I can't say it enough, but I absolutely love being able to do this with you guys. December, of course, is crazy, so we're gonna have to figure out the best date, because I'm actually out of town December 27th through January 1st. I go on vacation with my family. I will still totally be able to chat book club when I'm up in the middle of nowhere mountains, but I will have Wi-Fi. So hopefully we can figure out a date. I do think I'm gonna have it post Christmas, though. I think it's too late to tell people that they would need to read this before Christmas, but we'll see. I just feel like that might be a little too abrupt, considering this is about 300 pages. Oh my gosh. Okay, we got another like 20% of the back here, just acknowledgements and notes. This is 319 pages, around 300 and so pages. So I feel like that might not be appropriate to ask people to read this as soon as possible. But anyway, we will see. And I don't think the person that emailed me about pictures and books is in this chat or in this specific meeting, but somebody was asking, because they mostly do audiobooks, but they would pick up a book if there were pictures in it. And so, yes, I will let you know that there are pictures kind of scattered about, which is super fascinating. I absolutely love when books include pictures, but in the middle is fine. In the middle is fine, but like within the book is better in my opinion. So anyway, I will make sure to make a note of that. And
That's something that sucks about audiobooks. I mostly listen to audiobooks and I miss out on all the cool pictures.
I love audiobooks though. I absolutely love audiobooks. Somebody said that they did the entire Salem Witch Trials book last month on audiobook, and I was very impressed.
I did too.
Oh my God. My brain cannot do that. My brain is not big enough. But yeah, this one has, if you were considering picking up a physical copy, this one has pictures kind of like interlaced, and it also has in between kind of thoughts. It's got little interesting, well, this chapter, there's like a ball and chain, but like in one of the first chapters, it's a bone. There's a skull and crossbones. So this is a very like fascinating visual read, which is very ableist of me, but it is a very awesome visual read. So anyway, thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Instagram or email or I guess TikTok. I'll be checking TikTok too. I didn't even look and see who was in the live, if anybody put anything over here, because I couldn't see the chat. But this will be on YouTube. My thoughts exactly. Somebody agreed with somebody. Cool. I want to join this book club. Oh, somebody was in here, but they had an unstable connection. Anyway, again, thank you guys so much for coming, and check out the book club's page for the next poll when we decide on a date and time for the next book. Thank you guys. I will see you soon. Bye.